hey, welcome to the Pure Church podcast. You know, usually this is the part where Zach gets on and he talks and tells you we got a great show coming up, but actually he's the show. And here's the reason why is because we were talking about what are some of the topics we wanted to tackle on the podcast. And sometimes you have people that you've heard their story and you realize you're like, that's a movie plot. Like that would make a really great movie. And Zach's actually one of those that the arc of his life, the story of his life, that even at like his younger age, I'm really impressed by. I love, you know, you've been working here how many years now, Zach?
2 years.
2 years. And, you know, I remember as I started hearing your story, I go, wow, like the depth of someone of, no offense, I'm just old, but of your age, you know, many times it takes people a lot longer and a lot more stuff they've had to go through to learn what the things that we don't know. Right. Yeah. And what I felt like hit really with your topic of your life story is we all have roadblocks, and many things are stuff that God, we know he's called us to, we know we're supposed to do. And then suddenly roadblocks show up that we go, wait a minute. The path I think God's sending me on, the way I thought I was supposed to go, I don't see a way to get there. And I feel like your story really fits with that. And so I think for people today that are struggling with roadblocks in their life, just going, God, I don't know how to move forward. I feel like you're calling me to things. I think they're going to find some inspiration and some hope in your story. So thank you for being willing to tell it today.
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks for the opportunity. I think, when you approached me and you're like, I think it'd be really cool to have your story on the podcast. I was excited because I do like telling my story, because I think there's a lot of people who go through the same type of things, and it's really easy to feel alone. So yeah, I guess I can jump right into it. I'm Zach. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I'm an only child.
That's the actual name of the town.
Yeah, it's called middle dash of
nowhere. Yes, Texas, popular place. A lot of tumbleweeds.
Yeah, just kind of out in the middle of West Texas, and grew up in a Christian family. I really, since I was a little kid, I've had such a passion for storytelling. It's something that I always just love the feeling of like going to a movie or listening to a song or something, and just the feeling and the emotions that you could get from it, and the way that, you know, telling stories can affect someone.
Yeah, it moves people.
Yeah, I mean, if you think, a lot of Jesus' ministry was telling stories, telling parables. Yeah. And that's why you read through the New Testament, you're like, wow, you can relate to these parables and you can understand God a lot more from these parables. But anyway, so I loved watching movies and things like that. I didn't really realize what that meant, but as I was growing up, I actually wanted to play basketball a lot, and I was like, I'm going to be an athlete.
Tall.
Yeah, little did I know I was going to stop short at 6 feet tall, and if you want to play basketball, that's pretty short for a basketball player. But yeah, so I was practicing really hard at sports, and I was doing all these things, and I started noticing, especially even when I was younger in elementary school, like I'd be doing something, and suddenly I just get this like really violent like popping sensation in my knee, either one, and then it just hurt for days.
Yeah.
And I was like, sweet, I don't know what's going on. And I'd have to like step out of games because it was just like, throbbing pain, and my knee would swell up real big, and we had no idea what was going on. And it kind of just started getting worse over the years. And we weren't really sure what was going on. So it got to the point in about junior high, I was about 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And I was messing around with one of my friends, and we were kind of fake, play fighting with each other and pretending to kick or whatever. And he accidentally actually kicked me in the knee. And it threw my knee out of socket. And I'm not going to go into detail because this was pretty gross. We'll just say my leg went a direction it's really not supposed to go. Mm-hmm. And I wound up spending 6 hours with my knee out of place because they couldn't figure out how to put it back into place so they had to take me in an ambulance and go to this hospital, and then the doctor had to figure out how to get it back in place and anyway, there's a whole...
And for people that don't know, like my dad's had some arms and some shoulders and knees go out of place, and I saw as a kid, like it is extremely, extremely painful. When your knee goes out of joint. It's not just like, oh, I need to pop it back in. Like, not like it kind of locked up. It's like, it's super painful.
Yeah, it's painful and just a feeling of extreme discomfort because obviously it's in a place it's not supposed to be. So So it took 9 months to recover from that injury. And in that time, I lost the muscle mass in my other leg. And so I started dislocating that leg, doing just like things like tripping in the hallway. I was doing the Cotton Eye Joe one time, and I, no joke, dislocated both of my knees at the same time while doing the Cotton Eye Joe, and had to ask someone to come put them back into place. It was just like...
although maybe that was, maybe we don't do the Cotton Eye Joe.
Yeah, to this day, whenever the Cotton Eye Joe comes on, I leave the room.
Next track, please.
Yeah. For reference, this was Texas prom, and in Texas prom, people do country dancing.
Oh, so that's an intense deal. I didn't know that. I mean, you dislocating both your knees at prom. I mean, that's...
Yeah, it was like a dance. I don't remember if it was prom. It was one of those dances, but yeah, it was
a very public place.
Yeah, like my freshman year of high school. It was a very public place in front of my entire school, and they all freaked out. And I mean, and so it was a tough time for me because it got to the point where I couldn't like walk. And so I had to, I could, but I would have two crutches, and I'd like use the crutches to walk down the hallway because I couldn't support my body weight well enough without the crutches. And it got to the point where I couldn't walk. So we were talking to my doctor, and he was like, I'm going to try to find something for you because, it's gotten to the point where like your quality of life, I mean, all your friends are out running around and playing sports and stuff like that. And I just had to just sit there.
Yeah.
And so we went and we prayed about it at my church. And I had a lot of people pray over me and my family. God's blessed me with a wonderful family, wonderful parents and grandparents who love Jesus and prayed for me night and day. And I am so thankful for that because that is, I mean, yeah, and beyond words, thankful that God put me in a family like that. And then we got this call from my doctor, literally the day after we were praying about it. He said, "Hey, so I heard there's this doctor at Scottish Rite Hospital, and he said the knee condition that you have that's causing your knees to dislocate like this, he specializes in. He actually invented a surgery to make kids who have that kind of condition make their lives more normal." And so my parents said, "Well, let's talk to him, all that stuff." And so to get into this hospital, there's a lot of kind of hurdles you have to jump over and stuff like that because it's a specialty hospital. But I was able to get in by the grace of God. I was 16, and between 16 and 17, I got my first knee operated on and then my second knee, and it was about 9 months of recovery for both of those surgeries.
And not to interject too far back, but I mean, one of the parts of your story that really impacted me too is, kids are cruel.
Yeah.
And so you're in a wheelchair you'd shared with me, like in school, have to use a wheelchair, you're on crutches at times, and kids are kids, and there's bullies and stuff. And the things that you experience in the midst of that, the rejection and just not fitting in, and even have to be, you're sitting in a wheelchair looking up at people like those, that created even a ton of, that was hard.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of shared some stories here and there about, there are kids that, I had a kid that kids that would like steal my crutches and like hide them from me and then tell me like, "Oh, you want to go get them? Go find them." Yeah. So stuff like that. And I had a person that was in the hallway and they just shoved me into the lockers when I was trying to walk down the hallway. And, and obviously, there are things that many people have gone through that are much harder things to experience. But I also think it's important to share because, you tend to get where you feel really isolated because you're the only one. I was the only one in my school that really kind of had the experience of like not being able to walk. Like, sure. I was kind of known as like the crippled kid in high school. Yeah. And so people are kind of people do a weird thing when you are disabled in some way where they kind of treat you differently. And I don't know how to, I'm sure a lot of people who have been disabled in a certain way before, like they don't know how to necessarily talk to you. Sure. Even though you're just the same as everyone else. Sure. You just, you can't walk or, whatever. And
kind of like those moments where everybody goes to like a funeral everybody knows they're supposed to do something and they know they're probably not doing the right thing, but they don't know really what to do. So they kind of just, I won't say, and I see a lot of times, because I've got a couple friends that have some disabilities, and that's what they experience is people just sometimes tend to avoid them because they just don't know how to relate to them sometimes.
Yeah. And I had, and I can, let me be clear, because I had some really great friends at the time. And there were some great kids in my school that were really kind to me during that time. So there was a lot of kindness and a lot of, like one of my best friends, we're still best friends, and he carried my backpack everywhere to every single class. And,
Wow.
I mean, I remember, homecoming, was it sophomore year of high school. He had this huge crush on this girl. He wanted to ask her to homecoming or whatever, but he knew that I wasn't gonna be able to go to homecoming, and so instead he just skipped out on it and brought over a bunch of video games, and we just like played video games in my house on homecoming. And so I had some great friends that.
Yeah. And the reason I jumped back to that was teenage life is hard enough without having to go through all this additional stuff. But what I really blows my mind is you were essentially not able to walk for like 2 years.
Right.
And yet you made a decision I'm not going to let this define my life. Tell me about that.
Yeah. There was a point where I got really discouraged. Because, you're watching everyone else have fun and you feel like you're the only person that I don't get to go to the homecoming, and I can't do the sports with all my friends, and they're all going out and hanging out and doing stuff that you can't do. It's like, I can't go on the hiking trip or whatever. And I got really discouraged, and my dad kind of sat down with me, and he was like, I know it's hard. He's like, you have two options. He's like, you can either let this beat you down, or you can use it as an opportunity to do something else, do something with what you've been given. So
with great power came great responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a joke because everybody says you look like Peter Parker. Spider-Man.
I do get that pretty often. Yeah, I get the Peter Parker vibe.
It does feel like there's that moment just now.
Yeah. And it did, it shifted my perspective. And, I think a lot of times it's easy to get down in the weeds of things and to just stay stuck.
Yeah.
But for me, I realized I need to do something. And even though I'm not happy with the way that my life is turning out right now, maybe I can do something with it.
Yeah.
And so because of my love of movies and storytelling and things like that, I could just sit and watch a movie and be captivated. I was literally telling some of my coworkers earlier about like Mission Impossible and how I just get so captivated by the action scene, whatever. And I was like, I want to do that kind of stuff. And so from that point on, after my dad said that, I was like, I'm going to do something. I like movies. I like storytelling. I'm going to make my own movies. So I started making my own little short films, and it started as really like stupid little stop motion Lego and whatever. And I was doing all these things. But then I heard that there's this statewide short film competition. Mm-hmm. And at that time there was like, I think 200 or 300 other like schools participating in it. And I was telling my parents, like, I think God might want me to be a filmmaker. Like, I think he wants me to like make little movies and things like that. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you like, put a film in the competition? So I did. I somehow convinced the curator of this museum that had all this stuff from the Wild West to let me film in his museum and use like these old Wild West houses. We filmed inside of this train, like this old train station, like this whole thing, and we made this whole like bank robber film.
And there's a fight scene. He let you do a fight scene, or did he not?
Yeah, he let us do a fight scene in the train. I don't know how I could. I don't know if he just thought he was doing charity for this crippled kid or whatever. Like, whatever. but he let us do it, and so I did film the whole thing like on crutches. Like I was like hobbling my way over, and I'd film it, and then I'd hobble my way over, and I submitted it into this film competition, and as like my first film I ever did. And it got 4th place out of like 300 other schools, which is like, I was like, okay, maybe this is something I should do. So I was like, I think God wants me to do this. So I got back into it. Well, so after all the knee issues, I was kind of, they got better. I got the surgeries. I was able to walk.
Yeah.
I was able to even started being able to run and like do some things like that. And then my doctor said, well, we want to look into one other thing because you grew 8 inches in like a year.
Oh.
And they said, I think your spine might be a little curved.
Yeah.
So they checked and they're like, yeah, you actually have fairly severe scoliosis. They're like, it's not horrible right now. I think I was at, I want to say I was at like a 20 somewhat degree curve. I had like 3 20 something to 30 something degree curves down my spine. And they were like, your spine kind of looks like a, like a little S. You should go get that checked out. Well, Scottish Rite Hospital, the hospital that got my knee surgeries at, is also the hospital that discovered the gene that causes scoliosis.
Really? I didn't even know that was a site.
So we called them. We're like, hey, can we get him in to see about scoliosis? So they got me in and they said, okay, we can get you a back brace. And this back brace is really just designed to prevent your curve from getting worse as you grow. And so I had to wear 18 hours a day. So it's like a plastic shield they put on. It shoves up in your like armpit, and then it pushes your spine like it was crazy when you like tighten it. You could feel it like straighten your spine because it pushes your spine.
Sounds
to be
pretty
more
uncomfortable.
Straight. Yeah, it was very uncomfortable, and I had to wear 18 hours a day, and I could pick 6 hours a day that I could take it off, and I'd usually do that like right after school. Like as soon as school was out, I'd take it off for 6 hours.
Sleep in it.
Yeah, I'd sleep in it.
Wow.
Now my back hurts a lot, and I'm having to wear this brace and all of this stuff, and I remember thinking like God, I don't get why it has to be this way.
Yeah.
Like it feels like everyone else has it so much easier than I do. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to take my faith seriously, and God, I believe you're real. So if this is what you have for me, then I'm just going to let it happen and let you do your work. And I prayed, and my family prayed, and our church prayed, over my back. Well, so after about a year of wearing this back brace, we go back for a checkup because if the curve has gotten worse, which does happen pretty often, then we're going to actually have to do a surgery where they put metal rods up your back and force it to be straight. And so we go in, they take the x-rays, take the back brace off, take the x-rays, and they come back and they say, so I don't know how to tell you this. They're like, what happened to you is medically impossible. We don't know how it happens. And they said it happens to only about 0.5% of the kids that we see at this hospital. And they said, your spine corrected itself.
Wow.
It's medically impossible for it to, the back brace is not supposed to correct it. Just, so anyway, I took this as a good sign, made another short film. At this point I was getting ready to go to college, and my parents were like, I was telling them like, I want to go to college to study filmmaking. And my parents were like, well, let's put another film in the competitions. Let's make sure that this is like something let's make sure that this is something that like you're good at, and you're not just, you're not just going to go to college and spend all this money to
underwater basket weaving, but it's my passion.
Cause it's a hard industry to make it in.
It is.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to make one more film. So I made the film, and by this point, that competition had grown to what they told me was like between like 600 to 700 other films that you were competing against, and it won first place.
That's awesome.
And so my parents were like, okay, you know what? Yeah. You earned it. You can go get a film degree, like do all that. So I went to college to get a film degree. And
you're following, the things that you feel like God's directing you to, putting passions in your heart for.
The doors have been opened. God's given me he did not want me to be a basketball player. He wants me to be a filmmaker. So I did this for about a year, and I actually got the chance to work on several film sets and things like that while I was there. But the problem is I was working on film sets, but when you go to like work on a film set, they don't actually they don't really tell you much about the film you're working on. You kind of just sign with the studio, and then you're
hired to fill a role.
Yeah, you're hired to fill a role, and you sign a waiver that says like, I'm not gonna
disclose.
I'm not going to disclose, and then I'm not going to refuse to work based on my beliefs, which, So I did that. I get the film role, and I'm not going to go into detail, but let's just say the film that I was working on was not Christ honoring.
Yeah.
And, I had to finish doing what I was doing. And there's a lot of things in that film that I would say are very highly morally questionable. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking, man, my name's going to go on the credits of this film. And I'm a representative of Christ. I don't think any representative of Christ should have their name on this film. I mean, and it just wrecked me. And I started seeing, there's a lot of great movies that are made. Sure. But the film industry is a very dark place. Mm-hmm. And suddenly I realized, God, I know that you're calling me to do something like this, but this is not the way I want to do it. Yeah. Because I'm not going to step into something and compromise who I am, compromise my faith. And so I actually wound up stepping into a ministry degree. I switched my major halfway through college to study theology, study of God and ministry. And
that had to be hugely challenging, though. I mean, this is the thing you've dreamed about since you were like 12.
Yeah.
And you're finally doing, on your path to do it. And to actually then go, God, this is like, I need to be obedient, essentially. I mean, that's all, not an easy step to take.
No. I mean, I had to think really hard about it because I was like, on one hand, I would give almost anything to be a filmmaker and get to do all of this stuff. And on the other hand, I'm thinking if I made it and I had to give up that piece of me, I had to give myself up. Instead of giving myself up to God, I'm giving myself up to the little G God of film. Mm-hmm. Nothing would be worth it. It wouldn't be worth it. And so I did that. And what's crazy is through that, I've gotten to do a lot of things, to have a lot of ministry opportunities. I wound up coming here at Pure Heart Church, where I get to do some awesome creative video and audio and whatever else stuff all the time that glorifies God, that I hope is able to be a discipleship tool and help other people grow in the knowledge of God. And I still work on film stuff. I mean, me and my best friend from high school, we write like TV show pilots and movie scripts. We submit them and we see what happens. And God will open doors where He might. But
one of the things when I saw your application come a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know you from anybody. You're just I think you just responded online or whatever. I don't even remember, but I remember definitely looking at your application and then going and looking at where you had linked to some of your stuff. And here, at that point, you were 20, what, 1, 2, something like that?
It's all kind of blends together at this point. Just graduated college, so I was 21.
21. So 21 years old. And at that point, I think you'd scored like 7, 9, some 12. I don't know what it was. How many like things had you scored, like put a music score to?
Like done like the movie soundtracks too. Yeah, I did a lot of like movie soundtracks growing up. I'd done 25.
25. Okay, so I was totally wrong on that. But like, okay, so that's even all the more crazier. Like here at that age, I remember when you told me, you're like, oh yeah, so I've like scored like 25 films, and some of them I like scored in like 24 hours or whatever it was, or 12 hours. You had like essentially no time to do it on some of these quick turnaround ones. And you like during this time, you taught yourself piano, taught yourself how to score things. I mean, again, it's like finding finding God. I'm not going to stay stuck. What are the things that I can lay here in bed and be sorry for myself, or I can go, what can I learn? What can I do? How can I move forward? And what I love is that by doing that, now these are gifts and talents that you're using here, not just in the industry that you were passionate about, but now as you've got your ministry degree and now you've started working at church, you're playing the piano here at Pure Heart, you're mixing down podcasts, creating videos, you've created some of the little music things that we've used here. I mean, all these gifts and talents that like were things that you could have and would have not been, no one would have looked bad at you for if you'd just been like, yeah, what could I have done? I was in bed for 2 years. I'd be like, well, yeah, well, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
Instead, you just said, God, I'm not going to stay stuck,
Yeah. That's something I love to give God credit for, because all the things that I think is so funny, all the things that I literally do for my job right now are things that I never would have touched had I not had 2 years where I couldn't walk. Before all the knee injury issues that I had, I never played piano before, never touched a camera, never even really thought I'd been like, oh, it'd be cool to be a musician, or like, oh, it'd be cool to make movies and stuff, but never even like given it that much thought. And if I hadn't have had what I call an opportunity in my life, I see the struggles that I went through, and I see these things that God gave me as an opportunity, because it always is.
Yeah.
It's always an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to stay stuck, or an opportunity to take what you've been given, good or bad, and allow God to use it for good. Allow God to use you.
Yeah.
In whatever situation you're in.
I love how you said that, because I think so often we go, look, I can't move forward because of all of these things that have hit me, the things that are in the way that, what am I supposed to do? We can throw our arms up, kind of just like, I give up.
Yeah.
And yet those are the times when maybe we're actually not realizing God's developing in us, moving us to, building within us things that we never would have explored or found or realized we, would have done.
Yeah.
There's a great verse that you were talking about the other day that I think really fits with that. You want to share that?
Oh, yeah. So James 1, one of my favorite parts of the Bible. I love where James says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you face trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness take its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And I think it's so interesting that, like, what he says makes you perfect and complete, lacking in nothing, is steadfastness, the ability to keep going, to keep trusting in God, and to be joyful amid the trials. And he says, he doesn't say, count all joy, my brothers, if you face trials of various kinds. He says, count all joy, my brothers, when.
Yeah. What I appreciated so much about your story is your responses, who you are today, but even in your responses at the time. I so wish that I would have been able to do some of those in my life. And I just realized there was times that I just got it wrong. I went through this process. I bought my first house. I spent hours and weeks and remodeling it and doing all this stuff to it. And then the 2008 crisis hit, and I lost, my car. I lost, my house. I, went through 2 years of fighting for it. And so all this stuff happened, and I had such an expectation going into it of like, God's going to do this at the end. He's going to work it all out for my good, my being the key word there. And, when it didn't happen the way I wanted, I decided to be bitter. I decided to let it affect me negatively. It affected my relationship with God. I had an attitude about it, and I was very angry at the way things went, and the way God, he didn't come through for me the way he was supposed to, was really my attitude. And here I'd been involved in leadership at church, and I actually then was not really going to church for quite a while after that, maybe here and there with some family sometimes. But I just had a lot of anger and animosity towards God. Now, again, it's like, in relative to being in bed for 2 years and major pain and bolts and screws and braces and stuff, it's like, I kind of go, wow, how petty am I? And again, as you kind of said, you're like, there's people that are going through worse things than you've been through, even though your story is a story of challenge. But I just think it's so indicative that we can go, God, wait a minute, where are you taking me? And maybe these things that I think are roadblocks are actually developing who I am. And I realize now, going back, I go, there was a lot of development God wanted to do in me. And instead I let a lot of it get kind of sideways in that process.
Yeah. And I think that happens to everyone. There's always a point where, I can't say that I perfectly was super joyful through that whole process.
I'm sure. Don't get me wrong. I sure was, but
Yeah.
to your credit, I appreciate that about your heart too, as you admit the times when you go, I didn't get it right always.
Yeah. And I think, I really thank you for sharing that, because I think it is cool, because if you guys if you watched Online Campus, if you've been on the podcast very often, I'm sure you get a glimpse into the heart that Matt has and the impact that Matt has. But I think like what is so cool is all these experiences that you've had, even if maybe you feel like you didn't get it right in the moment, the person that you've become is so incredible. A lot of people don't get to see this, but the way that you love people is incredible. And ever since I've been employed here, I think that's something that I've really seen and I really admire in you. And God has grafted that into you through your experiences. And I think that that's what's so cool about the roadblocks that we see in our life. I think that God uses those roadblocks to graft us and make us into someone. Not saying that he causes them to happen, but God is so beyond what we can comprehend and can use whatever happens in our life to shape us and mold us if we let him.
Yeah.
And I'm so it's a privilege to work with you and see how God's done that in your life.
No, I appreciate it. And thanks for sharing that. Not to be like, oh, thanks for sharing that. But here's the reason why, is because I don't think even till right now, I mean, I do try and care deeply about people, but I don't think I'd ever connected it to some of that stuff,
Yeah.
Even when I was younger, I had a lot of rejections that had happened, and I was very awkward kid and nerdy kid and stuff. And I think that's probably a lot of that way I was treated. I don't want to try and treat people that way, and so and then hopefully it's just, at the end of the day, I think as we look at the roadblocks, whether the roadblocks that have been put in our life by people or roadblocks that are put in our life through pain or health or circumstance, I feel like health is one that's not as discussed in the church as much sometimes. It's like one that a lot of people suffer silently because we can maybe understand, like, oh, I see that person has no money. But to when someone's like, oh, I've got chronic back pain, it's like, well, I can't see that really. And if someone hasn't had chronic back pain, they can't maybe identify with it. But to be able to go like, God, what do you want for me? And what is the path to get me there? And what are you doing with me in the process? That's something that I think that just speaks, it's our testimony of like, God, in the midst of all this, you walked me through it to make me who I am now.
Ultimately something, to make it sound like my story kind of ended there and it's like, things are great now. I still struggle with things. I think we all have things that we struggle with. I played the piano for too long. This is one of the funniest injuries I've ever received. Played the piano for too long one day trying to practice.
Funniest injuries, you said?
Yeah, funniest injuries I've ever had. But played the piano for too long the other day. Got something called IT band syndrome, which is just basically pain in the side of your leg because you're aggravated tendon. So I still get knee pain. I've had knee pain for the last 9 months, and I'm hoping it goes away.
And I've even seen here where like you're always a person that jumps in and you're ready to work hard. You want to be a team player and stuff. And so for you to now, again, physically, like there's times where you're just like, I can't go lift this tripod and camera and drag it somewhere, or this light kit. Like, I can tell that's hard on you.
Yeah. And I hate feeling like the guy that just sits on the sidelines because I know I've felt that before.
Yeah.
And it's still hard. It's hard revisiting some of those. Recently I've kind of just had to revisit some of those emotions because it's felt that way. There's a lot of pain in my leg. And I think what this has reminded me of is how dependent on God that we are. No matter how much, I mean, you could make all the money in the world and have the fewest amount of health problems and you still need God. We all need God. And at the end of the day, I get upset because I'm like, oh, my leg hurts and I can't do this thing that I feel like God's called me to do. I can't do this thing that I want to do. And what I realized was God was saying to me was, I don't need you. I want you.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. We need God. He doesn't need us. He created us for a purpose. And right now, maybe my purpose is not to do the things that I can't do physically. But I sure do need God to do all the things that I can do right now. And sorry, this is like something I'm working through currently, so it's like kind of hard to articulate.
But here's the thing, Zach, is what I love is that right now you're processing it. You're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because your story's not done. You're still in the midst of it. And God's not done with you. He's not done with me. You know, Pastor Dan, any of us. But I guess what would be there's someone that right now is listening to this and they go, yeah, but you don't know what I've been through. You know, abuse, trauma, loss of legs, you know, whether it's physical, emotional, financial, spirit, you know, I mean, there's all types of areas of our life, divorce, loss of a child. I mean, there's so many things that can cause us deep pain, cause us deep hurt, cause roadblocks that we feel like we can't get past. What would you say to that person?
One, I would say, man, lean on God, because God understands. It may not feel like it right now, because right now you feel like no one else can understand. And you may even feel an anger towards God for the situation that you're in. And one, I think God understands why we feel anger.
Yeah.
But two, I think just lay it all at his feet. Two, I would say talk to other people, because something I struggled with was I felt like there was nobody else who understood what I was feeling or who had felt something like that before. And part of the amazing thing about being in a community of believers, being in a church, is there are tons of people who completely understand. They may not understand. I may not talk to someone who's been through the exact knee issues that I've had.
Yeah.
But man, I've met people who struggle with many other things. I've met people who have way worse scoliosis than I do, or people who, have other health issues that prevent them from doing things they want to do. And we're able to talk to each other and cry with each other in the hard moments and lean on God. And so I think it's really important. Yeah, the two things that are the most important is, one, lean on God and lean on the community around you, because you've got plenty of people here. I know, at Pure Heart. I mean, hey, come talk to me. I'm here almost every weekend. Come find me. I'm either playing piano or whatever. Come tell me your story. I love hearing people's stories. And if I can come walk alongside you, I'd love to. That's what God's called me here for, I believe.
You know what? Thanks for sharing that, Zach, because I think that's exactly the things, as I shared, when I didn't get it right, my standards of what I thought God should have done, didn't come through. I couldn't see the picture at the time. And so I had my pity party and my whatever. And so I didn't lean into God. I leaned away, and then I wasn't connected in community. I actually pulled back from the church, pulled back from others that probably at that time could have been a part of, I'm not the only person who went through that, and probably there could have been a lot of people that could have come alongside me. So thanks for sharing your story, and thanks for some of your insight. And your willingness to continue to use your gifts for God's kingdom. It's awesome to see that, how he's developed you and the things you've been able to do so far. You just go, okay, God, where's he taking Zach next? Because it's cool to see what God does in each and every one of us when we just let him take the wheel and trust his way.
Thank you so much. I give God all the glory for that. So
good. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt.